again, everyone. Will Coble here, and this is the Calimesa Insider Podcast, your weekly look into the inner workings of your city government. And this week, we are joined on the podcast by our city engineer, Mike Thornton. Mike is a registered professional engineer and surveyor, and he has been the president of TKE Engineering since 2000. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, Will.
So obviously you serve the city of Calimesa as our city engineer, but your main job is president of TKE Engineering. So city of Calimesa obviously does not have city employees that do engineering. We contract out with your company. So tell us how TKE came to serve the city of Calimesa.
Well, in 2012, the city put out a request for proposal to engineering firms to hire a new city engineer. Our firm, TKE Engineering, responded to that request for proposal. We were invited to an interview. During the interview process, we convinced the city that we were the right firm to come and work with the city. During that proposal process, I proposed myself as the city engineer, and since 2012, we've been serving the city as its engineer.
And in your official role, do you have any other cities currently that you serve as the city engineer?
No.
Okay. So obviously, I think the thing that people see, especially when they see you at a council meeting presenting, you're usually talking about capital projects, right? So but before we get into that, and that's going to be a big subject, that we talk about today, what are some of the other things that your firm does for us and for our engineering division?
So the scope of engineering includes land use entitlement processing. When a project comes into the city and wants to build, it has to be entitled. And as part of that, it has a number of components. The components that engineering looks at is traffic, flood control, and other engineering-related land use impacts. When an environmental impact document is prepared, there are certain sections of that document that we take a careful look at. From that document, we identify the impacts of the project, and we prepare what is known as project conditions of approval. Those conditions have to be satisfied by the development prior to or concurrent with construction of the project.
And then you mentioned other services. We've talked earlier about some of the other things that you guys do for us in terms of getting money for capital projects, advocacy, those kind of things. So tell us about those aspects.
So we've developed a rapport with the city's lobbyist. His name is Jamie Jones back in Washington, D.C., who advocates on behalf of the city to help us find federal dollars to fund our projects. Good example is this particular year, we have a project that is through preliminary engineering, but we do not have adequate funds to construct it. It's the intersection of County Line Road and Calimesa Boulevard. We have planned to build a 2-lane roundabout in the intersection, and it would serve both the residents of Calimesa as well as Yucaipa. So it is a joint project. Our lobbyists, together with city staff, work together to identify funding opportunities for the project, and we were successful in receiving those by way of our congressional representative, Ken Calvert. The project is now fully funded, and we are anticipating going to construction late this year, and the key for that was our ability to acquire those grant dollars from the federal government.
So I guess a good question on that is, you mentioned for a 2-lane roundabout at Calimesa Boulevard and County Line Road, where currently there is a traffic signal. But I think part of that was because to convey consistency with the rest of County Line Road with the roundabouts that have been constructed. But if you could just briefly touch upon how roundabouts improve capacity.
Roundabouts provide a non-stop. In typical situations, you are required to yield if there is a car already in the roundabouts. But typically, you do not have to. You just move into the roundabout and continue to proceed. From a public safety perspective, the angle of incident is essentially reduced to the point where fatal accidents are 100% eliminated, but injury accidents or significant injury accidents, I'll use the word severe injury accidents, they are eliminated as well. It really reduces them to fender benders. So from a public safety perspective, it is much more efficient because we don't have to stop. But two, it's because when there is a collision, the collision is of minor nature. So they are preferred. From an air quality perspective, there are no cars sitting idling for extended periods like you would have to if it was a traffic signal. As you mentioned, we are applying what's referred to as the pearl necklace approach. We are constructing roundabouts at all intersections along County Line Road, from basically the freeway all the way to Bryant Street, to allow vehicles to proceed eastbound and westbound along County Line Road without having to stop. Much more efficient situation.
And I think when people hear yield or they see the sign yield, I think that's something that people struggle with, at least in California, because there's not a lot of yield signs. I think I was joking with our deputy city manager driving around the city one day, and I think I said, they think we need to refer to yields as California stops, because that's really what they are, right?
That is correct. They are California stops. You're supposed to slow down. If there is someone right in front of you, do not enter. Yield. If there is no one, proceed without yielding.
Right. Okay. So what are some of the other aspects of the engineering division?
So the engineering department is part of the management team. We meet every other week on non-council days, and we talk about everything that's going on in the city. And the engineering department, during those meetings, has the opportunity to provide input, to provide solutions that help overcome various challenges throughout the city. For example, if we have a high propensity of accidents that the police department is telling us about, it gives the engineering department an opportunity to weigh in to say, hey, we'll do some additional analysis at that particular intersection, counts, accident history, and do some engineering analysis to determine whether or not we should change the intersection control of a particular intersection. So being part of the management team allows us to interface with not just public safety officials, but planning, as well as public works. And it, I think, provides a comprehensive solution when challenges come up around the city for coming up with something that really applies to solutions.
Yeah, and I think that goes to not just how engineering interfaces, but I think that all of us interface. And I think those are important meetings for the entire city to enhance our communication. It's just one thing that we do. I think behind the scenes, obviously, people don't know about our frequency of staff meetings and what those contain. But I think it gives us all a chance to kind of collaborate on different things. And because we are such a small staff, I think that interaction is even more important, because a lot of times we're having to kind of step outside of our lane, so to speak, to help out in maybe other areas where you can, right? So
yes, and having served in other cities, as you have yourself, we bring a different perspective than other cities. This is how they handle a particular situation, even if it's not an engineering issue per se.
Right. That's true. I mean, I always try to avoid saying, well, in this city, I did this and we should do it that way, because, I've always believed that there's not a one size fits all approach to most things, and there are unique situations. And, you can lean, though, where if you have a problem and you've seen a solution work, you definitely can bring that experience to the table. So that is very true.
Some of the other things that we get involved with is flood management throughout the city. Recently, we've had some particularly heavy rainstorms in the city that have created flooding challenges, and engineering addresses those on a day-to-day basis. Traffic engineering, something we deal with on a day-to-day basis. If an intersection isn't working properly, we continue to look at it to see are there improvements that could be done to make it work more efficiently and safely. We do represent the city at regional meetings with the West Riverside County of Governments, RCTC, Riverside County Transportation Commission, and at flood control zone meetings. The purpose of representing the city there is to make sure that the city's interest is protected. And should there be funding opportunities for projects, we make sure that we take advantage of those opportunities and submit applications to receive funding. I think the city has done very well in helping to influence regional policies by attending these meetings, making sure that the issues that are important to Calimesa are identified, presented, and considered as these regional agencies develop policies for implementation region-wide. We also represent the city at neighboring city coordination meetings, talk about projects that we're working on together. County Line Road that I mentioned a little bit earlier is a project that we are collaborating with the city of Yucaipa. So we meet them on a regular basis and discuss issues and resolve challenges. And I think we've already discussed grants, but identifying grants is a big part of what we do, and preparing applications and submitting applications to federal, state, and regional agencies. And I think Calimesa has done very well in receiving our fair share of grants over the years.
Yes, that is very true. Very true. So let's look at some of the projects that we have happening around the city. We talked about County Line Road a little bit earlier. Can you tell us where we are with the main project that's been ongoing in terms of the roundabout installations, and what the timing of the next steps are, and when, at this point, obviously subject to change, when we expect that the project may be completed fully?
The project has been broken down into 3 different projects, is the way I will say it. County Line Road between Park and Bryant was, I think, our initial phase, again, a collaboration with Yucaipa. One of the challenges with our County Line Road project is we weren't the only agency that had interest in the corridor. Riverside County Flood Control, and a project I will talk about later, is Calimesa Creek. A portion of that project is constructed in County Line Road, or will be constructed in County Line Road. Also, South Mesa Water Company intended to put parallel water lines in Calimesa Boulevard.
County Line Road.
Or excuse me, in County Line Road.
Right.
The initial coordination resulted in a memorandum of understanding between the two agencies that would allow the city to do some work, vacate the site, and allow South Mesa Water Company to come in and do its water line work. Once our work got to the point where it was time for our contractor to vacate the roadway alignment, South Mesa was delayed in getting its project under contract. It is also state grant funded, and there was a delay in getting their funding agreement together with the state, so they were delayed in getting their project started. We had another delay related to having poles relocated along the 5th Street intersection of County Line Road, and had to maintain a closure for an extended period of time until those poles could be relocated by Southern California Edison. That work has now been done. The 5th Street roundabout is fully operational. We are now awaiting the beginning of construction for the 3rd Street roundabout. We have a small piece of right-of-way that we need to work out with one of the residents on one of the corners. Once that's resolved, our contractor is scheduled to move in September to finish that roundabout work. That will come after South Mesa's Water Company's pipeline work has been completed. And at that time, we will finish the final street work. Later in this year, we are also going to start the storm drain work in County Line Road between 5th and Calimesa Boulevard in order to complete that underground work before the final paving of County Line Road will be done, so the new street will not be torn up immediately after it's completed. So we are trying to coordinate the work. It has been delayed. I understand the public's frustration with the delays, but we are trying to move it in the most logical manner so that we don't have a road torn up right after we complete it.
Right, because if you tear up a road and then have to repave it, it does degrade its integrity, correct?
That is correct, and it ages it much, much faster, yes.
Okay. Another major project that we're looking at related to County Line Road, it's in its very, very early stages. Actually, it's probably pre-planning stages, I would say, is the interchange at I-10. So we talked about Calimesa, the intersection at County Line Road and Calimesa Boulevard, and so, but there is another project that we do have in the plans for the interchange.
That is correct. In order to complete improvements to the interchange, and for the public to understand, the interchange has not been improved significantly since the original construction in the 1960s. The bridge, the 2-lane roadway that goes under the bridge, is what exists today, and that was built in the 1960s. It is well overdue for a capacity improvement. In order to be able to do an improvement, we need to process an application or a process with Caltrans. It is a 4-step process. That process includes what's called a project study report step that we are ready to start this year. It will be followed by a project approval environmental document step, PA&ED. That would be followed by a plan specification and estimate step, PS&E, further followed by right-of-way acquisition step before we are approved for construction. Typically, that process takes 5 to 7 years, and we are ready to start that process later this calendar year.
Very good. Very good. So, so then speaking of interchanges, another project that is ongoing is the Singleton interchange. I'm skipping over Cherry Valley. I actually did a whole episode just on Cherry Valley, so we're just kind of updating on the rest of them. Sandalwood is in the future. It'll actually probably be developer driven, and so that'll probably be the last one in the pipeline. But Singleton, tell us about where we are with the Singleton Road missing on and off ramps.
With the Singleton Road project, we are in the PA&ED step. I summarized before that there is a 4-step process. We've completed the first step. We are just about completed with the project approval environmental document step. We have 3 or 4 reports left to get processed with Caltrans, but we're well on our way in preparing those. That would lead us to the plan specifications and estimate step, which has already been started and is about 65% complete. We anticipate that we would get Caltrans approval by the end of this year or early in 2025 so that the construction could start the second quarter of 2025.
Okay, and tell us why one of the important reasons for that and how it relates to Cherry Valley Boulevard.
It relates to Cherry Valley Boulevard because when construction starts there, we are anticipating a significant closure of how traffic is able to use it today. And Singleton is missing 2 ramps. Our conversations with Caltrans included, why weren't these 2 ramps built originally as part of construction? Nobody seems to have an answer to that. But we need those 2 ramps to be constructed so that it is a fully functioning interchange that would allow traffic to get on and off the freeway at Singleton, so that as construction of the Cherry Valley project ramps up, there is an alternate interchange that would allow to get traffic on and off the freeway without the significant delays that construction does create.
Right. And I think when we talk about closures for Cherry Valley, the designs are such that they're trying to minimize the amount of closures, but obviously it's inevitable. But we're talking about overnight closures, maybe a 55-hour closure here and there for placing of bridge parts, things like that. But we're not talking about like months, like a 6-month closure, correct?
That is correct. There would be limited closures, but remember, for example, we are going to build 2 new bridges and replacing the existing bridge. Well, the first bridge will be built while the existing bridge is still in service. Then there is an operation to flip traffic onto the new bridge and demolish the existing bridge. To flip traffic, that does take a period of time, can't be done overnight, but it would take a period of time to get that done. So there would be interim but limited closures to accommodate that kind of construction.
Okay, because I think when people hear significant closures, they think, okay, this thing's going to be closed for 6 months. So I just wanted to clarify that. So thank you for that. Another project that's related to roads that we've really been able to ramp up over the last couple of years, largely due to American Rescue Plan Act funds, is our pavement management program. And I think that one of the things that the public struggles with is understanding really what's involved with coordinating a project like that. On the surface, to the layperson, it may seem pretty easy to just go through and just pave a street, and they just think you just slap some asphalt on it and you're done. So number one, I want you to explain the engineering aspect of a pavement management program, but number two, the cost that's associated with paving roads and the significant costs that are associated with that.
So the first step in our pavement management program is identifying which streets are going to be paved in this phase. As you mentioned, we did 2 phases with the ARPA funding that the council did dedicate general funds as well to the program.
True, yes.
So we had to identify which streets. I'm going to say 5 years ago, the city completed a pavement management program. What that did is it identified for every street in the city a pavement condition index. The lower the index, the worse shape that the street is in. So for council, we identified the low-scoring streets and presented those to say, council, look at all these low-scoring streets we have. Way more money would be needed to fix these streets than we have available to us. So we bring it to council and ask them for assistance in prioritizing which streets would be selected. That was done in phase 1, and it was primarily in the Myrtlewood area. I'll say Myrtlewood east of Calimesa Boulevard is what we focused in on, generally in those neighborhoods. We did have members of the public come in and participate in workshops to help us identify those streets that would be selected for construction. That said, council made its selection. We packaged up a project. To bid a project and get a competitive bid, we have to put together what's called plan specifications. The plans show the location of where the new asphalt will be constructed. But we also have to do preparation of the subgrade in order for the new asphalt to have a useful life. And to be able to do that, we bring in what's called a geotechnical engineer. They come out and they look at the asphalt. They take cores of the asphalt. They tell us what condition the asphalt is in, and they provide us recommendations on how to rehabilitate that asphalt in the most cost-effective way. For example, in many of our streets, and the residents who lived on these streets that we did last year saw this firsthand, we came out and ground the asphalt and then came in and did an overlay. The grindings were hauled away to a recycling facility for use on another project in the future, but we would then bring in a new surface of asphalt. Once the new surface of asphalt is completed, then we have to restripe, make sure all of the drainage conveying facilities, curb gutter, cross gutters, and all those things were working properly, and all the driveways would continue to serve the properties adjacent to the streets. All that was done as part of the project. We specified all that in these plans and specifications I mentioned earlier so that we could get an accurate bid from our contractor.
Okay. And the utilities that the surface utilities, so water, valves, manholes, things like that, that's all got to be coordinated too, correct?
That is correct. Our contractor was responsible to protect those in place, do work around them. For example, when we paved, they would have to lower the manholes to come in and pave over top of them, come back and identify those locations, and then raise those manholes and valve can covers to grade.
Okay. And so now talk about the cost associated with paving. So there's obviously engineering costs, and that's usually estimated as a percentage of the total project construction cost. But what drives the cost of these projects, and what is the typical cost, let's say, per lane mile that you're seeing today?
What drives the cost is the cost of asphalt. As residents know, gas prices move up and down. Well, when gas prices are moving up, so is the cost of asphalt. Oil is a big component of asphalt construction, so that really drives the cost. I can't tell you a number right offhand as to what I would say a lane mile would cost. I could certainly calculate it and provide that to you and to the public. But the driving force is material. So I'm going to give you an example. If we come in and do a grind and overlay, that's about 2 inches in thickness. So you could calculate a volume. There's a width of the road, it's 2 inches thick, and a length of the road that we would build. That would tell us how much asphalt we would need. That would drive the cost of the project. If the roadway is in really, really poor shape where we can't just grind it and bring in an overlay, where we'd have to take out more asphalt and put in more asphalt, that increases the thickness, which would then continue to drive the cost of a pavement resurfacing project up.
Right. In the first example you gave, where it's just a grind and overlay, 2-inch grind and overlay, would you say that, I think, because I'm just thinking back to the project that we had, the bid that we got was just shy of $1.7 million. And that got us roughly about 2 miles worth of of pavement, but then when you consider a residential street, those are 2 lanes, correct?
That is correct, but there's also 2 lanes plus graded areas where cars park in front of residential development.
Right.
So it's typically about 20 feet of pavement from gutter lip to gutter lip is what we have to construct.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, and I think that people, see these things because, one of the biggest complaints, and this is one I understand, because I think if you drive around, you look at the streets that got done, they look beautiful, right? But there's a lot of parts of the city that it could be very legitimately argued that these are overdue for repavement. But I think that the cost associated with these projects is really what drives our ability to do them, right? And so I think that's the just the pure dollar amounts that are needed. Again, you saw these residential streets. You can go through and you can drive them all, and you can kind of figure out about how many miles that is, and then maybe extrapolate that to the rest of the city. You can, I think, if you went on Google Maps right now and you did the satellite view, you can see, I think, the streets that were done, and then you can kind of look at that as, okay, how much of that is a percentage of the entire city, and then look at the cost that we got for the bid last year. That cost is obviously higher because labor costs have gone up, but the major component of oil also gone up. So the cost of doing that work is more than it was last year. So if you have a certain amount of money that you put aside every year, as time goes on, the amount of pavement you can do for that money gets less and less, right?
That is correct.
Yeah. And we have funds that are available that are restricted for road use, gas tax money, Measure A. And so those are our 2 restricted pots of money. Another source that you can use for capacity enhancement projects is our development impact fees, to the extent that the project was identified in our Nexus study. But those cannot be used for pavement management.
That is correct.
So I think that's another thing that the public needs to understand is that, number one, we do have money that is dedicated, that can be used and will likely continue to be used for those purposes. But without supplementation from the general fund, it's going to be difficult to do any significant projects and make a dent in this.
Yeah, those funding sources woefully inadequate to meet the needs that the city has.
Right, and I get people, saying that oh my gosh, I already paid too much in taxes. Our gas taxes are so high. But I think that one thing that people don't realize is that while the rate has gone up, the revenue coming in has not, because of 2 factors. Number one, the proliferation of electric vehicles, and number 2, fuel efficiency standards. So as fuel efficiency has gotten better and better, cars are using less and less fuel. So you can drive the same amount of miles that you did maybe 20 years ago, but you're going to use less gas, and therefore you're going to pay less in gas tax because of the consumption. So the rates may have gone up, but the consumption has gone down because of those 2 factors.
That is correct, but I just add one more component to the electric vehicle discussion. They are much heavier.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Than the gas-powered cars, and weight is a big component on wear and tear of streets.
Right. I think because people know that big rigs obviously have a disproportional, wear and tear on the road. So that would go to reason then that EVs, for the same reason, would have that same issue. So another aspect that engineering, and I think we're gonna wrap it up with this subject that you mentioned, flood management and flood control in the Calimesa Creek project. That's something that people don't see as often, right? They don't think about as often because you drive on a road, you go to a park and things like that. But that's one of the pieces of infrastructure that people don't really see, and you really don't notice it and need it until there is a flooding problem. So if you don't have flooding problems, that's probably because you've got a good flood system in place, correct?
That is correct. Here in Calimesa, we primarily rely on our streets to convey stormwater runoff. And in many areas, our streets have very little capacity. What creates capacity is tall curbs, gutters, and they carry the water downstream within the roadway section. But in many other areas, we need to supplement the roadway capacity with underground storm drain pipes. We have pipes around the city, but they are few and far between. For Calimesa Creek, the project that you're mentioning here, there is a gap. So let me explain. At the freeway, there is a system that goes under the 10 freeway near Baker's on County Line Road. Then there is a gap where it is a natural channel until you get almost all the way to 5th Street along Calimesa Creek. At 5th Street, it is improved. I'm thinking all the way back to Bryant or somewhere in that general area. With this project, we are going to fill in that gap and improve it so that the erosion that is caused during significant storm events does not continue to occur. In doing so, it will provide flood protection to the downtown area, City Hall, the Civic Center here, as well as the fire station that has been flooded as recently as in storms from last year. That project was primarily paid for by Riverside County Flood Control and Water Conservation District through efforts that the city did to get zone funding for the project. We've been working on it for about 10 years to accumulate enough money to fund the project. We are now there, and as I mentioned a little bit earlier, we are going to bid that project in the next couple of months and have that work done before the end of the year, before we resurface the roadway, so that we do not have to come back and do that. It will be broken up into 2 phases. The first phase is the roadway phase. The second phase will be a basin that will be constructed on property that the city recently acquired on County Line Road near 3rd Street. That property is now purchased. We will construct a basin there. The purpose of a basin is to attenuate stormwater runoff to reduce the peak flow amounts downstream. In doing so, we do not have to upgrade the storm drain system under the freeway. It will now have adequate capacity to safely convey 100-year storm events.
And just briefly explain why that's beneficial to us, because I think it's a function of cost, right?
It's the significant cost of building a large diameter storm drain under the freeway through the bridge or under the bridge over at County Line Road and the freeway was going to be very, very significant. And the benefits of a basin are, 1, it's less cost, but 2, it provides water conservation. For us here that rely on groundwater for our drinking water, basins allow for greater percolation of stormwater runoff into the aquifer for production and use for drinking water.
Right. So that water, that's a big thing that people talk about is like, why don't we try to hold some of the water? So this is a great example of a project serving a dual purpose.
Correct.
Right. Well, I really appreciate you coming on the program to talk about these projects. I know these are big deals. One more thing on Calimesa Creek I do want to mention. How much money did we get from the County Flood Control District for that project?
Nearly $11.5 million.
Yeah, that just goes to show. And the city is kicking in approximately another $1 million on top of that. So that we have from development impact fees for flood.
Correct.
So lots of big projects happening in the city, millions and millions of dollars being invested into our infrastructure over the next few years, and a significant chunk of that coming from other places. So that's the value we're trying to add as city staff to bring these projects to our public, while being able to maximize our local dollars here for essential services, police, fire, parks, things like that. So again, Mike, thank you for coming on the program. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, I look forward to doing it again.
Thank you. And there he goes. And that will do it for this week's edition of the Calimesa Insider Podcast. Remember, there's no city council meeting this coming Monday. Our next meeting will be Monday, July 15th. Now, with the 4th of July coming up this week, our fire department would like to remind you that fireworks are illegal throughout Riverside County, and that includes the city of Calimesa. The fire department and sheriff's department will be out monitoring for fireworks, so if you get cited and fined, don't say I didn't warn you. Besides, you wouldn't want to be responsible for burning someone's house down or injuring yourself or others, right? Your best bet is to attend a professional fireworks show, and there will be several in this past area for you to enjoy. So have a great and safe 4th of July, and I will talk to you again next week. Thanks for joining us.